We're a little bit this morning, but I think people will gradually come in, so we'll make a start. Yeah, welcome to day 3. I hope everyone's had a good time so far. And I'll just run through quickly what we're looking at today. So today's really about capacity building and financing. So very important topics. Of course, we've looked at hydrology yesterday and early warning systems the day before, and this sort of completes the picture here. So we're going to start with a Q&A session, essentially. Then that's going to go into some shorter presentations, some solution providers. Then we do have a panel session on financing, which will be really interesting. We have the roundtable sessions, again, the same topics. So I guess choose a different topic today. And then we're going to have a wrap-up session at about 3:45, which will be looking at, next steps and the outcomes from today. But Kerry's asked me to ask everybody to come back for that. Otherwise, it's quite fearsome. I would come back. And that's what we've got going on. So it's been an amazing 3 days. I'm actually going to have to shoot off just before the end of the day today. Got to get back to family stuff. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming to our event, and we're hoping to do it again next year. So you'll all hear from us. But let's get going with the Q&A session. It's going to be bridging the gaps of capacity development, and we've got Neil Brackin here, president of Advanced Radar Company, who's going to be chairing it. So I'll hand over to you.
That's great. Thank you, Luke. The other members on the panel, if you want to just work your way up here, that would be much appreciated. As Luke mentioned, the design of this is interactive. So Q&A with all of you here. It's meant to have a good discussion, identifying some of the gaps and issues, but more importantly, what are the solutions to these problems that we and you have identified and discussed. What are some action steps that can be taken out of this meeting and out of this discussion? So please think of your questions and your topics that you'd like to bounce about here over the next hour or so. We did have one of the breakout sessions yesterday with Jan Barani leading that discussion. It was very useful last night, so thank you for that. What I'd like to do to start this, we have one remote participant as well, and started with a thank you to Brackin and in particular Kerry for organizing this leading up to this event here. Thank you for the venue and the participation. This group and others have had about 3 online meetings to banter about and vet some of the questions and issues out there in advance. And for all of you that are looking at participation, there's those opportunities going forward out of here to use the Brackin network to continue to find solutions to your problems, and particularly here with capacity building. So what I'd like to do is offer my other panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves and start with a statement from your perspective on, what is your biggest issue when it comes to capacity building from your perspective to get some topics flowing out there. So we'll start with that.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone in the room. My name is Zablon, Shilenje. I work with the World Meteorological Organization, it's called the Applied Sciences Region. In this particular position, I have had an opportunity to look around the meteorological science in the country. And I think there are certain gaps when it comes to provision of meteorological and hydrological services that need discussion and addressing. One of them will be the gap related to human resource and personnel in these services. Over the years, the numbers have been coming down, especially because of the structural adjustment programs, economically that were introduced a few decades ago. Most governments have not been able to fill up their personnel in terms of provision of meteorological services. We are aware of some services that are operating below optimal levels. This is a big challenge. I think the solution will have to come from national governments to look at their policies to be able to see to increase capacity of this personnel to provide these services. The other aspect relating to personnel will be competencies and skills required to provide these services. WMO has guidelines and standards that are required for personnel who are providing these services, and we intend to ensure that countries adhere to these guidelines. Unfortunately, not all countries are the same level. So we will see gaps in these particular areas that need to be addressed. The private sector can come in this area by providing initiatives and programs that can be able to support countries, increase the competencies and capacity levels of their researchers and forecasters, especially at higher levels. If you look at the levels of PhDs, for example, in our med services, you can do research and come up with new ideas and do modeling. This coming down. Some countries are doing well, but others actually do not even have personnel at that level. The other gaps that I think exist are in institutional frameworks of these med services. Some of these med services do not have well-grounded legal systems that support their services. I know a number of countries have had a discussion with some of the directors here who have indicated that they are trying to ensure that these legal programs and frameworks are developed in their countries to be able to give them backing and be government authoritative voices when it comes to providing meteorological and hydrological services. So these will be areas that we need to work together to ensure that all these countries have support to be able to develop this kind of mechanisms. There are others that doing their work. South Africa is a good example in the southern region that has good examples that can be emulated. If we go to East Africa, Tanzania, for example, has a good framework that we can look at and have other countries learn from. Nigeria, a big brother also in provision of meteorological services, is doing very well. But there are others that we need to pull up. I'll give you examples, for example, from Eastern Africa. If you look at South Sudan, it's a country that we're trying to support and help have steps that can be able to provide these services. If you look at Somalia, for example, if you go to emerging countries like Guinea, you will find that they need support to be able to provide this. The other gaps that I have noticed over time would be able to access some of the climate products that come from our global producing centers. You know, the provision of meteorological services, you have the global producing centers that give us climate products. Then they are downscaled to regional centers. So regional centers also are able to downscale and provide regionalized products for which national governments then downscale to be able to provide national warnings. At the national level, unfortunately, not all countries are able to do this. We need to give support, to provide monitoring capacity, to provide information that can then be used and localized to the regional and sub-regional levels. Some of these countries are so huge, for example, South Africa. You need to be able to look at provision of meteorological services at national level, then move on to sub-national level, and even the local, very local levels to be able to engage the end users and provide this, access this information. There are gaps in these channels, and I think the private sector will need to be able to support these countries adopt some of the WMO guidelines. For example, the national climate for framework, national framework for climate services. This will provide guidelines on how we can be able to ensure that climate services are provided from the national levels. So there are a number of apps. I could go on discussing this because I have had interaction with most of these services. But I'd like to stop here for now, and I'll take the floor. Thank you.
Good morning all, I'm Winnifred Jordaan. I am head of the Regional Training Center here in South Africa, and I'm also represented on the capacity building panel in WMO. So from my side, I will talk about that angle. So the capacity building have always been a problem, and capacity building have always solved the problems. But it will never go away. I think that is one thing we always will have to remember, because people get older and retire, or just leave for better salaries. And so I'm in a very good position actually, because I will always be needed. So on the capacity building from WMO, they usually do a survey right around the world. And I've got the newest result for RA1. And the biggest hazard identified by RA1, that is Africa, is flash floods, floods in general. And the second one, of course, drought. Now that is not new. If we think about the La Nina and El Nino, on the moment we are in a El Nino, so southern part of Africa will be dry. So that is where the drought comes. But it's very interesting that the two main things are floods and the drought. There are others that include tropical cyclones, hailstorms, lightning, dust storms. That is standard what we get in Africa. So what we have to remember is something. We have training institutions in Africa that we have to take along with us. There are universities that actually specialize in meteorology, climatology, and hydrology. We have to make sure that we get them into a group and we work with them. In South Africa, I don't train the basic meteorological package. I leave that for the universities to train. What we do is we train the competencies. So that is the skills and the knowledge to do something. So in WMO have the WMO Global Campus. That is where you can advertise your courses, and I would suggest that you actually look at it. But out of that, they have now created what they call Connect. That is where the training institutions for RTCs comes together with universities. And we work together to actually see how we could reach the gaps that have been identified. Remember, when you teach, you are actually teaching in your specialty field. Now, I cannot cover all the specialty fields, but if you look at the South African service itself, I might use all the people within South African weather service that have specialities, but there are also universities. So I would suggest that you actually have a look at the WMO Global Campus, see how it is, and talk to me about Connect, especially for the university, so that we can get you onto the group, so that we can actually talk to you about what is needed in the world.
That's great. Thank you both for that. We do have a remote participant on the panel as well. So I'll hand it over there for introductions, opening statement, John.
Thank you very much. Katie, please confirm you can hear me clearly before I proceed.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. So I realize I'm the only remote panelist. So a massive thank you to the organizers for making this possible. My name is Viola Otieno. I work with NORCAP, but I'm deployed at the Africa Union Commission. I work as an early warning expert, specifically focusing on drought. And I want to say this has to be one of the most important questions we have to ask ourselves if we are going to advance climate services in Africa. It's important for us to look at the entire value chain as well. I know we are talking about the skills and the capacity as well, but we need to look at the entire value chain of climate services. So I would like to focus my submission on two things. One is the infrastructure. So there is a gap in infrastructure. If you were to look at the map of hydrometeorological ground station in Africa, you will realize that there's a lot of large expanse of Africa that either do not have the stations or they have inadequate stations. So the question for me becomes, is there a way we can use innovation and technology to fill in these gaps? And I was thinking about IoT, for example, Internet of Things. And this has been shown to work in some areas, other parts of the world, but this has not been adequately leveraged in Africa. So the question is, can we be able to do the same in Africa? And also, what would be the equivalent of IoT for rural areas, which make up most of Africa and also has the largest data gaps as well? What kind of infrastructure can we put up in the rural areas to be able to fill up these data gaps? The other challenge is that climate change change is causing the climate to change, So there is a need for real-time data collection, but not just the data collection. We need to have connectivity that allows for this data to be quickly assimilated into models. Because I hear conversations around, can we still trust historical data to be able to give us better prediction? And therefore, we need to consider real-time data collection and quick assimilation into models. The other gap is in modeling and forecasting, and I like the submission that have been made about WMO working with universities as well. I think this provides an opportunity for private research partnerships in understanding the drivers of different weather phenomena or weather and climate patterns for different African countries. And when you talk about modeling and forecasting, you cannot forget to mention the infrastructure that is required to carry out the modeling and forecasting. And one of the challenges in this has always been power, electricity, and internet connectivity. So there's also an opportunity here to provide alternative power, so green energy, or even alternative internet connectivity, such as satellite internet as well. And then I come back to one of my favorite gaps, and I mentioned it in my presentation on the first day, and this is the translation of warning into action. And we could develop the most sophisticated systems and issue the most accurate and most timely warning. But if the action does not take place or is not done in time, then intrinsically we have failed to achieve the objective that we were aiming for. Therefore, there's an opportunity, I think, for the private sector to come in and see how do we close this particular gap. I think so far it's very clear whose mandate it is to issue the warning. A rather gray area is whose responsibility is it to act on the warning that is issued. And in this sense, I see opportunity in services of climate, value-added climate services like insurance, but I think dissemination of services. Private sector can come in and customize messaging to fit the last mile user needs so that we can be able to, the last mile user can be able to act. Then the last mile user does not have to be the farmer. It can be the farmer, it can be the decision maker at different government levels, and it can be even regional organizations as well. But we need to customize this messaging. So at the end of the day, it's a matter of finding out what is the reason or reasons behind non-action or delayed action. And I think there's a business case here for the private sector, and mainly for two reasons. One, projections show that we expect increase in frequency and intensity of climate extreme events. That's one. And two, the population growth in Africa is on an upward trajectory and it's growing very fast. So what does this two mean? It means we have more people who are and more people who will continue to be exposed to increasingly extreme events. And therefore, there is demand for services that are going to bridge the gap between the warning and the action. Thank you very much. Those were some of the things that I wanted to highlight when it comes to capacity gaps in Africa. Over back to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you for the opening remarks and identifying the opportunities there really with those gaps that we're all seeing from our different perspectives. And so trying to channel these into some particular topics and also challenging all of you for your key questions. So I'm going to just hit some of the topics, go back to the panel here, but I want to get a question from a group here, whether it's private sector or one of the clients, hydromet offices. What's a key question that maybe didn't get included in here? So we're looking at human capacity building and training as a key question and concern, infrastructure, connectivity and tools, social, which was brought up there. How do you get that last mile and the warning? You're doing great work and doing great sensing and forecasting, but is the communication proper and being a proper response from the population? Financial comes into everything, and certainly capacity building. The financial question is out there. How does this get financed and funded? And so Anybody in the audience, is there a topic or a question that we need to add into this group? Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, is it okay? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad that the connectivity has come and in the discussion related capacity building. Because we also try to have some workshops, interact with various countries. So as an outgoing chairperson of RA1 Committee on Services, I observed an emerging enabler challenge for capacity building that we are engaging on. Countries have been trying to participate because now we've got a new way of doing things. Virtual workshops, virtual engagements. But some countries are connected, some cannot even connect. So how do they then benefit? How do they contribute? How do they engage? And also leveraging on this question, if we talk about engagement between the public sector and the private sector, how can the private sector at country level also contribute, to this connectivity infrastructure? And then my last gap that we don't really touch on is in the area of equality monitoring and equality modeling within the continent. I don't hear us engaging more on this, and yet the demand is increasing. So what are the views of the panel members or of the House in terms of equality monitoring and equality modeling and forecasting? Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. We have maybe an answer here. More questions?
I have a question. I just want to follow up the same idea as Mr. Valley, because we are good universities in Africa in meteorology. In WMOs, we work within the meteorological type of thing and hydrological type of thing. There's also other organizations in Africa. AIMS is one of the, I don't know if you're familiar with AIMS, it's the African Association for Mathematical Sciences. They bring out visiting professors for a year helping with postgraduate studies. I think it would be a good idea to look at all those kind of things, because I interacted with them in Rwanda, and they are willing to fund also in this early warning system, meteorology and hydrology, to provide funding for that, and they have a lot of funding. The other thing is also, Ali was talking about connectivity. A lot of universities in the US and North America do remote courses. And with remote courses, you can do it like that. Yes, you need internet connectivity and those kind of things. But you can invite professors from any university in the world to give specialized courses in certain areas. And so these are all kinds of options. I think we need to make things step outside our comfort boundary of just meteorology or hydrology, but looking at other organizations that have funding to do this that are very active in Africa also. And then the second thing is, how can we get remote connectivity better? And I think the private sector can help. We are working in South Africa with an IT company that's bring the IT companies and also not only the private companies that are in the center field, but let's bring in some IT. Starlink is used in many countries, but let's engage with those organizations also if we do certain things like this. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Dr. Ruoff Brunches, I have the fortunate opportunity to work with Mr. Brunches, and I'll call on an answer from the private sector. I'll go back to the question back there, but since I have the mic, I get to talk. So I'll say, on the sales side, we're those of you in the audience here too, my fellow vendors, we're traveling out there with the bumblebees, bouncing from office to office, and we see different capacity challenges out there. And something that Roelof has brought into, our business and our company is he's always putting forward him, in his background to perform a workshop. So yes, we're doing sales calls and we're capitalists and we're looking to see how we can sell our products and services. But we're also spending an extra day or 2 days before or after having an expert who's talking on whether it's related directly to our product or service, or as Roelof mentioned, bring somebody in remotely, working with a university or another organization, and make that part of your site visit. Do a link that, do some education, collaborate with the Met Office, the Hydro Office that you're working with, and bring some education and good communication into those visits and those sales calls.
I was gonna say, I also have a mic, so I can say I have 2 comments and 1 question. The first comment is, I know the course and my role here is hydromet, but most typically they're sitting as 2 different units. I think it would be viable in terms of capacity development, that there needs to be some cross discussion, cross learning between the 2 very distinct units. I know as I said on hydro, we don't typically work with Met. We let our weather services do that, we just get the data. But it would benefit me if I had that understanding in the background, and I think it would benefit them if they knew exactly how it was influencing the hydro side of things. So I think they would help with capacity development. My second comment is in South Africa, we don't speak from our context. I know we have study programs where institutions, the different universities and ourselves as the national government, as well as some private companies, sit in a program every few months and we discuss what research is going out. And we all have input in that. So I think that's a viable way for capacity development to address specific skills or specific issues that need to be addressed in the field. So we can direct and influence and guide what we see lacking. So those are my 2 comments. My third point of the question, when we're talking about capacity development, it's a very broad topic. And I want to know perhaps from WMO or from the panel, when we're talking about capacity development, I think it cross-cuts at all 3, but is the primary issue the quality of the skills? Is the primary issue the quality of the skills? Was it the consistency of the personnel? Because I mean, the human resource part of it is also there. We can train, we can put in all this effort, but if they don't hang around to actually use those skills, there's no benefit. You just repeat the cycle. I have a third point, but it's got to do with where is the problem lying? Is it the universities? Is it the are we not offering the training, or is the training not adequate, or are they just not hanging around then? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay. I think direct answer to you. Competencies is a mixture, knowledge, skill, and attitude. I can train knowledge, I can train skills, I cannot train attitude. Okay, that's number 1. I think that we have all to recognize. Now, in South Africa, and I will be quite honest, our training is very well known and of high standard. And we cannot hold on them because we do not train knowledge. So that is your answer. So like I stated, I will never be out of a job because I was trained. So on that side, let us acknowledge that. Our forecasters, our researchers are sitting right around the world. It's good and good for me, not for weather service. So that is number 1. On online training, we have capabilities to do online training. Now, online training is critical for the person that is receiving the training to be interested. So I can do online training forever. And you can sit there, and you can make coffee, and you can do play games, and you can do everything. And I have no control over what you're doing. And that we experience time and time again. Another problem with Africa is that you see them coming in and you dropping, see you coming in and dropping. And it is not conducive for training. So what we have done is all the courses, online courses, are recorded. They are stored on our Moodle site, and you can log in afterwards to listen to it. Do I do it? Open question. Okay, so that is very important to note that. What we have found is that you have to have what do you call it, a little feat with the run forward. That is a certificate. Now, for me, a certificate, three meanings. It's a certificate of attendance, presentation, or competency. Three different levels. And it depends on what you can do as a training center. Can you test the competencies? If I can test the competency, you can get the certificate of competency. Participation is, did I hear you? Did you speak? Did you participate in the discussions? That is what it is. Attendance is attendance. Now I know what I do with attendance certificates. 12, 13 is very nice. I think that is reality. So what we do is we have courses, online courses that people can attend. We are busy with NTG, which is our third generation training. Everybody in Africa can actually log in. So I'll give you the links. You can log in. We can do it. If you want a certificate out of it, you will do a test. So that is how it will work. You want a certificate, case study, present the case study, put it on the website. That is how it will work. So in Africa, it is difficult, but it is totally dependent on the audience. Are they interested? Connectivity, I cannot answer on that, so I will hand over for anybody who can answer it. But online training have its users, but they have to be an attentive audience looking.
Okay, thank you again for the mic. Just a few issues I would like to pick up and carry forward the discussion. One of them is the last question on whether the capacities on the numbers, competencies, all of them I would say, from where I sit, are an issue. There are a number of countries where the numbers really matter even beyond the competencies. You will be surprised that there are many services in Africa here where they only have 3 forecasters for the entire nation. How would you expect them to provide the medical services? And they are maybe only offering aviation services at the airport because they have no capacity to support agriculture sector, the energy sector, health sector, and all other sectors that require medical services. So the numbers is an issue. Quality and the competence levels also a very big issue. WMO tries to support this by providing capacity programs. We have specialized programs that support some of these countries. Some of the programs we have already discussed in the last 2 days, including flash forecasting guidance systems, where we provide a number of countries capacities on how to do flash forecasting. We also have programs that support severe weather forecasting. We have even specialized centers for this region to be able to provide this kind of competencies to the personnel with this. And then we have specialized education and training program. WMO has an entire division of education and training that provides specialized training from certificate levels to scholarships, working with universities, all the way master's programs up to doctoral programs. And we do this across Africa. We have trained a lot of scientists. Unfortunately, can we keep them in the med services? That's a different question. Most of them get trained, some get stay, and some move on to postdoc, just like my colleague has said. and there isn't much we can do about this. When Ken is concerned about modeling, yes, it's a gap. I already mentioned that the capacities of some of our main services to access products coming from the global producing centers is limited. You need experts in climate modeling and weather modeling to be able to provide these products. It's a serious gap there. WMO tries to support this. I've already mentioned we have some specialist centers that are able to guide some countries on how to produce this, but we still have a serious challenge in terms of accessing even satellite products. We know these are specialized scientists that require and equipment to be able to access products coming from these highly specialized entities. So that's a gap that we still need to follow through. But lastly, I would like to pick something that has not been discussed about the disconnect between the national main services ability to provide early warning information and some other entities at the regional level, at the continental level, that can also be able to provide guiding products on early warning. We had a presentation from Viola on how the situation room at the AUC has been supported to be able to provide continental products. We also is very well organized. We also had a presentation from ACMA, and we could be able to see the continental early warning that they are offering, especially on Drought monitor. I know in the region we have a number of regional climate centers that are also providing these guidance products to national institutions. If I give you the example of Eastern Africa, where we have the bigger climate production center, it's one of the very well-resourced centers on the continent. So you see, it provides early warning information. I see a very big disconnect between this regional and continental institution and the national institutions. These regional institutions are very well-resourced, especially with the resources coming from the private sector, and those resources do not find or cascade all the way to the national levels. We need to change our thinking, be able to support more the national entities, so that the national entities also have the capacity to provide this early warning information and to give them more capacity. From where I sit, it doesn't look very good for me, for example, for African Union to come to Tanzania and give them early warning information. Yet Tanzania has the capacity that we can be able to do this. Just like in the southern region, we have various centers that can be able to support this region. So I think we need to be able to see how we can harmonize these institutions, both at continental, regional, and national. I think that's what I want to pick for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Zablon, and our online panels.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to just respond to maybe two of the issues that have been raised. I think there was a question on how can private sector and country level also contribute to connectivity. And again, it boils down to the thing that we keep saying in most of these meetings, which is collaboration, multi-stakeholder engagement, and also cross-sectoral engagement as well. And I think this calls for private sector or the telecommunication services providers in the at national level to be able to talk to each other, but also to be able to work with a national Met or the climate services providing institutions to see how best they can be able to disseminate information. But it also calls for private sector within the countries to talk to the national space agencies. Some of the countries are establishing or do have national space agencies. So this could be an alternative to connectivity, solution to connectivity. But apart from that, the private sector at national level can also collaborate with global players, both at the space sector and also in telecommunication services. So there's a lot of things that can be done, especially if we collaborate and work together as well. The other one was on the issue of modeling, and I think Zablon has touched on it as well. The quality of the modeling is an issue as well. So most of the time it's either the accuracy, but sometimes also it's the interpretation of the output of the model. So models come with certainties and probabilities, but most people do not know how to translate this certainties into actions as well. And then there was the Zablon. I appreciate the comment on the disconnect, and I think it's one of the areas that we need to work on as well. As I mentioned in the first presentation, we are trying to establish situation rooms, and the situation rooms include infrastructure, include software and systems and standard operating procedures. It includes connectivity across the national and also the regional as well. And it also includes capacity building in terms of training as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially if we can be able to work together to be able to address these gaps that we are seeing across the continent. Thank you. Over. Back to you.
That's great. So get some good solutions out there to go with the questions, and appreciate the good comments from the panel here and identifying resources that are there. And I think Winnifred really hit it. It's about engagement and attitude. You can't teach that, you can't transfer that. So this is a bit of a call to action for all of you that are here. You know, write down your next steps. When you finish this session, what are you going to do to reach out, whether it's from Met Office to hydro to ag? What are some resources there within your country that you can access? What's on the regional side that is out there? Reach out and connect those dots. What resources can bring to your team, and then certainly on the WMO side. Back to the group here for another question.
Yeah.
Engine roll off.
Thank you. Want to the last comment on the disconnect between national net services and regional climate centers. So because, for example, my organization, we support capacity at both regional and national level. And there are cases when you have limited resources, but we know that one of the commandants of the regional climate centers are also to build the capacity of national net services. So if we are not able to support all the national net services, then the best approach is to strengthen the capacity of regional climate centers so that they are able to cascade this capacity to national net service. But if this is not the case, then we probably need to have a discussion on how best, because for example, ICPAC is a regional climate center of excellence for the WMO. So I believe to some extent, the WMO probably will be in a position to make sure that, they support the capacity of national net services from the support they are getting from, such as, NORCAP. I think the other issue I wanted to mention is also infrastructure is also key, especially for modeling. We have countries that, we work with, and sometimes they request for support to, deploy experts to support, modeling. But when we do assessment, we find that even if we send the experts there, they don't have the right infrastructure that can be used or tools to help them. For example, last week we were in the regional center for Central Africa, and of course it's a relatively new center. They requested for support, and we went to assess. But we found that they don't have computing, facilities, even internet connectivity. So it is very difficult to support them from that level. That means we start by, enabling them to have tools and infrastructure so that, they can be supported in terms of strengthening their capacity to improve, for example, Thank you.
That's great, thank you. Jared, I think.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Allow me to just focus a little bit. Maybe there's a different way of thinking about the problem. But there's two parts to it. One, I think, which is not often addressed when we speak about capacity development constraints, is where are we heading in light of the science that tells us that 2030, 2050, the world is a very different place from where we are. That means, what are the academic programs that we currently have, which are not focused on individual sciences, but are more Earth systems directed. And the reason I raise that is because, to a large extent, we speak of, simple example, multi-hazard early warning systems at national. If you go around the continent and show you will find that there's zero multi-hazard early warning systems. There are early warning systems. There are multiple, but they are not multi-hazard in a way that says to a coastal community, here are your hazards, here is your vulnerability, here is your exposure, and here are the risks, and therefore here's the information that you can access to mitigate that. Durban, coastal inundation, inland flooding, all of those kind of things we know. But I think to a large extent, our community has largely been focused on hydrology as a particular focus. So that's one, is what new skills and what new people are we getting into the system that think very differently from where we are today. And then the second part, of course, which I think is often discussed and is possibly discussed, is this notion of how then we deal with those that are already in the system, with the constraints that we have, one of those has been raised now, which is even when you have support, China, I don't know if they still do that at WMO, at some point had 20 long-term fellowships. I remember I visited the university and saw some of the students, 20 annual. Most of those students are not able to return to the continent, largely because they don't have the infrastructure that they were trained on satellite, that they are then able to come back. And most of them were pressuring China to keep them so that they can continue to work, otherwise they're lost to the system. So there are constraints, and therefore I'd like to also just venture one, which says one that I have not, a gap that I have not addressed, is leadership. Because to a large extent, that may be where the problem is that it's at the leadership level that understands that you don't accept the scholarship unless you ensure that you understand where they're going, what they're going to be doing, and whether you're able to support them when they return. So it's the planning, the engagement with government, all of those solutions are there. But do we have the right leadership in place to engage in such a way that it's not only focused on current problems, but also in the future? So both a question and a comment.
Yes. Okay, thanks for giving me the floor. Yes, I agree with you. We still work with a number of universities in WMO to provide this type of trainings. But sometimes when I look at the profile of the officers who have the net services, quite a number of benefits, as you say. But when they come back, do they have the facilities to do this? Some of them stay a bit and they move on to places where those facilities are. So I think it's a challenge that you're bringing forward. We need to find out what a way with it, how to be able to sustain and maintain these resources. I think it's a discussion we can pick up in the forum with the directors of these various agencies and be able to see whether we can find solutions. You mentioned about EMS. I didn't comment about it, but that level is one of the EMS very costly, especially in generating what we call climate reports for the continent. We do various reports, reporting some aspects of what goes on in the continent every year. And EMS are very critical in this. They provide us with information related to climate scenarios, projections, and where we think we will be in the coming years. So we've been working with them also very closely. And then I would also wish to hear the sides of some of the directors who are here for these capacity caps on what we need to do. As WMO, we get feedback from such forums, and we're able to work on some of the problems that they have to be able to improve the provision of the services.
Thank you. I think my name is Louise, and I work for small tech. And I think the debate so far is also showing how many interpretations of capacity there are. It's like a mosaic, so I apologize for jumping from one important topic to another. But Viola mentioned the partnerships and collaborations with mobile tech and again ways for national and private sector to engage.
And what we've experienced in our work with the director at Rito and then also in Malawi, where we've been piloting and scaling our technologies, the willingness to test new technologies is pretty high, and it's very appreciated. There's a level of risk-taking and willingness to test new technologies that is really cool, it's really impressive, and we've achieved really good results. But what we do not see a lot of risk-taking is amongst the financiers, so the development banks and the UN organizations, unfortunately, in terms of their financing. They will oftentimes decide maybe 2 years upstream what they want to finance, and they traditionally keep to established technologies, and that's obviously very, very important. But and equally is the importance of bringing in new innovations and technologies, enabling those partnerships with particularly maybe national telco and private sector engagements. And so with that is just to wrap it up, is we find that when innovation starts being introduced in different sectors, such as the financing sector, there's a business opportunity there, there's a market. But in hydromet, unfortunately, because of the quite traditional and sort of rigid financing coming from multilaterals, it's the market opportunity might not be there. And so this is an encouragement to, in your dialogues with donors, to say, actually, bring in some financing, generate some more market opportunities, and you'll see innovators and public-private partnerships flourish. Thank you.
That's an excellent point. And do we have anybody that represents the finance perspective here? It's a great point in some discussions in the last 2 days with members here on just that topic, that it's wonderful to have these financial institutions and donors coming forward, but are they directing things and having the financial capacity deliberately tied to capacity building, whether it's in the training side or looking at the infrastructure from ministry to ministry to see if this is forward-looking, to Jared's point, and therefore structured properly for the hydromet office to really succeed.
Yes, thank you very much. I will be very brief. At the Nile Basin, we have like 3 challenges: ownership, usability, and sustainability. So we are always trying to tell the countries this is not an MDI project, this is not an MDI tool, this is not an MDI product, this is your tool, this is your product. We are just coordinating what we have. So we have that challenge of ownership, also the usability, whether if it is like information services, products, tools, so the usability. And the third one is like sustainability. When the project ends, we just start a new project, and no matter what good work we did in that project, sometimes or many times it can die. So these 3 challenges. I can add another one. It is also like the selection of the appropriate expert to get that capacity building. So we capacitate irrelevant experts because they have been nominated by their countries, and we can't challenge the countries to change them. So these are some of the challenges that we have also. I think we are. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Yaman. Another question, maybe listening to all this gaps in early warning systems, all the conversations I see are let's find the gaps, looking at the problem. Early warning, we want to disseminate. What about looking at the problem from the bottom up, from the farmer's perspective? Here's the drought warning. Does he have the tools to do anything about it? Care about the water, right? There's not going to be any water. You can't do anything about it. So why care? So look at the problem maybe from the bottom up also. Find the gap where the two rows don't meet. And then maybe the problem is that there's not affordable insurance, no affordable insurance that we can have in Africa to help him do something about the problem. Yesterday we had a conversation about people settling in river basins, temporary workers that are dried up rivers. And then suddenly get the rains and they flood them. And they have early warning, but they will not leave because as soon as they leave, somebody else will take their place, they don't have a place to live. So there maybe needs to be capacity building with the national disaster centers to give the people the tools to be able to react to the early warnings, and then they will care, and then all these problems of disseminating information will actually go away because they'll be willing to listen to what the Met offices and the hydrologists are saying is going to happen, because they'll have the tools and the means to do something about it. That's my opinion.
Thank you now.
Hi, Ola. So I'm Bradley Riley from the World Bank. And I think I want to just respond to Louise, to your comments. So, I mean, as the World Bank, I think the comment that you made is very relevant. And I think the World Bank and investment and financing institutes, particularly, is quite recent in the African continent. We've got the African Agreement program that's only kickstarted about 2015. So in that phase one kind of approach that we took is we identified that a lot of African countries and areas are really, they have low maturity, they're quite immature systems. So we try to use tools and technologies that we know have worked. So I think that's why innovation is kind of taking a bit of a backseat. And I do believe in future programs and in the future phases of the African Continent program, there is opportunities for those sort of technologies and building these private public partnerships. And I think there's a panel that later today that focuses on those financing instruments and the building of EPPs. And I think we can discuss that a bit more. So yeah, just to really touch on the point. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I know there is a session later to follow here on financing. It's a great bridge into that as well.
Thanks again. Take the floor just to address what the colleague has said about financing. But I also like to bring in the role of countries when it comes to recipient of this financial support and the activities that are formulated in these countries. More often than not, the financiers or financial institutions tend to come with pre-agreed activities that they intend to carry out in these countries. And some of them, quite frankly, do not fit the needs of those countries. So there is need for us to synergize between the support that is coming into these countries and the needs of these countries. So it would be good to do this in consultation. In WMO, we try to do this most of the time, where we have support from African Development Bank, the World Bank, and other financiers. We bring them together with the countries and have a discussion and ask the national countries to identify which areas they would like to be supported. So this is one thing that I just wanted to bring about. And then also another solution on capacity building would be to use country support to other countries, like peer learning, like training programs, where you have, for example, some members from countries like South Sudan are being supported by countries like Egypt. So you have well-doing countries supporting those coming up. I know South Africa, the southern region, is supporting a few countries around where they are, including the Swatini and others. I know within East Africa, Tanzania, for example, want to see whether we can be able to support Burundi on some tools that are developed. Kenya has been supporting a few countries within the East Africa region on common African protocol and other issues. So this is one area that we will be able to bridge these gaps. We discuss on capacity development by having countries that have the capacities support that those do not have. This will be able to move forward.
Just want to add to that. There's a great need in Africa for capacity building. But on the other hand, we can support and we do support and we do train. But to do it properly, there's financing needed. And there's a lot of financing needed to actually do it properly. Because you can do it halfway. Like my late husband says, half drop, half back. So please, that is something that we have to understand. We know the gaps. We can train, and that is why we want to bring in more of training institutions. And the training institution is not a university, and it's not to say I'm talking about the training institution. And that is why, if you know about the training institution that can assist, let us bring it into the group. Let us bring the document in and we can understand what is needed. That's why connect is there, so that we can enlarge the training facilities and the training offerings. So that is what we need to do, but then we have to do an organized way, and it has to be the funding to actually support and carry it forward.
It's great. It's certainly evident we all play a role in making this capacity building successful. Understanding, what is the need specifically in a country or, in your region. Making sure it's asked and requested when you're writing your proposals and looking for your projects. And then on the financing side, having the flexibility that, it's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all type of check that's being written, that there are some unique capacity, some unique gaps in each of the locations that there needs to be funding directed and required to be obligated to, so that this chain can be completed.
Thank you very much. I am James Noma from Zimbabwe. In terms of the challenges that people have, I think Zimbabwe is one of the most challenging in the Southern region because of many reasons. But what we have noted is that if we take our whole of government approach, we achieve more. If in the past few years, as Zimbabwe, we have achieved to get an entire radar system that covers the entire country. We have more than 200 automatic weather stations. We have digital stations. We have a number of different capacities. Even when I carried out a few interviews a few months ago to get more forecasters into the message, and we were actually shocked by the capacities that were there. We got people from outside the country trying to come into the fore. So there is need to fully publicize what you're doing. And once people see that the train is moving forward, a lot of people want to get on board and start seeing the progress that you're making and say, we want to be a part of this progress. Even if it doesn't offer much in terms of financial benefit, people still want to be a part of something that they see is moving and making progress. So I believe taking our whole of government approach, in terms of our radar system, it wasn't met who actually advocated for, but we had three different ministers. We had the minister in charge of disaster management, the minister in charge of agriculture, and our own minister speaking the same language, saying we need this. So it was much easier for the government to buy things. It wasn't through donor funding, it wasn't through the soft funding that we achieved this. It was through the government itself saying we want to do this. All the stations in Zimbabwe were funded by the government to get the automatic weather station and the digital station. So it is possible, and it is possible even in the country that seems not to be doing very well. It's still very much possible. So it's up to us to build our future and say this is what we want to achieve, and we can make it happen. And it's the help of everyone. I think for us, the WMO projects, such as the national framework, paved the way for this because we began engagement with the different sectors, and the sectors saw the importance and the relevance of net information in their planning. So today, if we say we're going to have a flood in a certain area, everyone comes on board. There was a time when we used to collaborate with the disaster management in terms of producing our alerts and warnings. So this previous season, we issued an alert that was green, and it was saying there's going to be a dry spell. So for disaster, a dry spell means there's not much thing to worry about. Then the agriculture sector came and said, but for us, it means totally something different. So you should have collaborated with us and given us different warnings. So sector-specific products are now more in demand by the end user than from us pushing forward. So it takes the whole of government approach for us to achieve much progress in. Right now, I think last week we were installing agronet stations across the map as the next department. So agriculture is actually demanding for the services, the infrastructure from us and saying, we want this, come and install this, do this. So the whole of government approach helps us achieve because more things like that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Great perspective and great to see that success there. It fits back here. It's attitude, engagement. If you're getting a no, well, go to the other door and ask and get the yes over there, right? Department to department, ministry, go to the regional center, but get the capacity and the resources that you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I represent the this. We have mentioned that discuss our first year. And we are speaking actually the regional office. We had analysis in Africa. And the gap is clear, very clear in Africa. We know the gap. And we know challenges for each country in the continent. And the countries are not at the same level. So challenges are not at the same countries in Africa. Now, what we need, I agree with all those areas that we mentioned as gap. We have gap in infrastructure, great gap in connectivity is a very great gap, and that's because of the technology now. It's important for each country to be connected, and we have that gap. And there is gap also in expertise, and we mentioned here that some of our people, they are taken for training, they are not coming back. And even when they come back, they can be there for a short time and then leave to other areas. Now, how can we bridge this gap? What can we do? What is supposed to be done? This is now the main thing that we need to discuss and see the way forward in this area. For us as WMO, in capacity development, there is a number of programs in WMO. But you find that for Africa, even to access, like if I give just a small example of these global centers with the NWP products, countries in Africa, they cannot access these products. They are there, and the support is there from WMO, but the capacity at national level for them to access is a problem. Now, what can we do to make sure that we support and assist countries in Africa to make sure that we bridge this gap? There is a need to work together, not only WMO at global level, at regional level, and whatever level we mentioned, the climate RFPs, and also we have ISMCs in the structure of WMO. But also, we need to consider how we can enhance our collaboration with the governments at national level. And we have studied this. In my presentation, I said, when we have this rollout, even Viola mentioned it, the rollout now is involving everyone at national level to make sure that we work together, we understand the challenge together, and find solutions together, so that at the end, when you have projects in the national level, at the end of the project, governments need to know that they need to sustain. Because the big challenge we have in Africa, a number of projects are coming, supporting to bridge the gap, but you can bridge the gap for a short time. At the end of the project, you go to square one. So we need to think about sustainability. Whatever support we are bringing to Africa, let us consider about sustainability. At the end of this project, what will happen? Are we going to sustain the level that we are?
The challenge is to sustain the level. But in analysis, a number of projects have come to Africa supporting. I mean, we have different times. You can find that for the time that you have projects going on in the country, they are doing very well. But at the end of the project, after 2 years, go to the same country, you find there is nothing. So now it's important for us to see how we can support and sustain. And the only way to do that is to collaborate with the private sector. That's why we are here. Find the way how we can better collaborate and work together. At starting from global, but now scaling it up to the national level. And now when we are talking about end users, they are there at the national level. So it's for us to see how we can work with the government to ensure that we bridge this gap. But I agree that the gap is there. And the challenge in Africa is big. It's not the way we even think for us at a regional level. The way we see countries in Africa, we have a great gap, and we need to make sure that we support all these capacity development programs. Everyone has those programs. She said she's from the capacity development panel. We have also the panel in the regional level, but still that gap exists. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, it's about all of us, and it's about people, right? And it starts with whether it's the top down, bottom up, across. That this has to be a deliberate effort and a deliberate topic for everybody in this room. You know, for me as a vendor, I've got to make sure I'm asking the question of the Met Office. What do you think about capacity building? We're going to look at the shiny new object here in the country. How is this going to be sustained? How are your people going to be trained so that they can maintain, so they can utilize the instruments that we deploy? So it has to be in the conversation in all our roles.
Yeah, I think maybe to catch on what the madam was saying there. For me, yeah, maybe well banked here. But the issue, the biggest gap and challenge is like we're talking life, we're talking property, we're talking people who are suffering. But whenever you think well banked, the first thing in your mind is bureaucracy. Because the systems do not work for developing countries. If the bureaucracy say, oh, okay, well then, 3 years to go, maybe they will release the assistance that is needed for addressing issues in Africa. Because the blueprint is the same for US, for UK, for Africa, which is a different system altogether. And I'm really pleading with people somewhere there. What is the how woman just unbundle them, you know.
Yes, thank you, Mr. World Bank. You get the opportunity to reply to
that. I'll try my best to unbundle the bureaucracy. As I said, but I will be. No, I know this is a huge challenge in developing countries, and it's something we've got to grapple with really often. I think the World Bank has gotten itself into a little bit of trouble previously about unloading financing investments too quickly. And that's why we go through this quite delayed process. We've got to do a lot of project preparation support, identify where the gaps of support are before we can implement new financing or investment instruments. And what we're actually focusing on now is providing technical support first and building the institutional capabilities and capacities before we unload these huge investments in finance opportunities. Previously, we've seen that when we don't offer this technical support and really build these capacities, investment opportunity for an investment at the end of the day kind of falls flat. So we can make sure that the investment isn't going to fall flat. It's actually going to be, over the long term, it's going to be effective, and it's going to be worthwhile but yeah, it is something that we've got to grapple with a lot, and it's always up for discussion, and it's a challenge when we do have these huge investments and opportunities. But that's why we do really start with building that technical support, which takes a few years before we can unleash this huge investment opportunity. But thank you for the question.
Well, thank you for the answer and the response. So, as we're closing this up, I'll give the panel here a chance for a final comment, but I really appreciate everybody's good feedback. That's what the session is designed for Q&A, and I encourage all of you to keep those discussions going the rest of the day here and following as your travels take you back home.
Thank you. From my side, capacity building discussions have always been a hot topic. I won't say hot topic. And as long as we're not keeping our people, like I said, I will never be out of a job. But with the earth systems, I always said that my training was a handful, and suddenly my training subjects are zoneful. And that is why we cannot do it alone. We have to get our partners on board. We have to get them aligned to what is needed, and let us work together then so that we can move forward and we can reach the gaps. So, and only when we actually realize you cannot do it alone, we have to have the partners together, then we can move forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again for this opportunity to make last closing remark on this item. I think we have identified some of the major gaps that we need to work on going forward. I have them all in a series of all kinds of analysis that we can be able to provide where these gaps exist. I think we need to think together on how to meet them. One that we did not mention and which is significant is the visibility of this meteorological services and the disaster risk management teams at the national level. We did an analysis with the support of NORCAP to understand whether these institutions have websites, just simple basic websites, information that you can be able to access. If you wanted to check all the 54 countries in Africa, you will be surprised that 3/4 of them do not have a functional website. You just wanted basic information about usually what's happening in terms of the DDR, and you realize you won't be able to access this kind of information. So visibility is also key, the gap that we are working on to see whether we'll be able to fill. In terms of World Bank and other financial access information, I agree, bureaucracy could be a problem, but the other problem will be as our members have capacity to access those financing opportunities. Some of them will require detailed proposals, technical in nature, and WMO has participated in some of these proposals, supporting our members to be able to access these facilities. I will tell you that it's not that easy. So too technical, we need to have capacities at national levels to ensure that our people can be able to access these financing opportunities. So it has been good to be part of the discussion. I've learned a lot. And I also believe I've contributed something to the discussion.
Yes, you certainly have. So thank you to the panel for your work in advance. Our other panelist has checked on. She had another obligation. Thank you, Brackin, for the platform, both leading up to this and the meeting here, and everybody here for the great comments, questions, and solutions. And I think we can all take it from here that each of us can make a difference in building these bridges, closing these gaps. We heard from all aspects of our industry and both public and private here, and we all have a part to play in bridging the gaps so that a year from now we're talking about more and more success stories. So thank you all, and we're transitioning now to the technical presentation from myself. So we'll have a small break, but then come back here for a very important message.